Hey guys, welcome back to my channel. Shimmer Rachel. I'll be doing my November wrap up. So before I get started, if you are new to this channel, please don't hesitate to subscribe down below as well as hit the notification bell. But for the month of November, honestly, it was not the greatest month for me. I read a total of 14 books, and out of those 14 books, I read 5,552 pages, and I read 4 books 2 stars, 4 books 3 stars, 2 books 3.5 stars, and then 4 books 4 stars. So you can tell the quality of the books was not the greatest, which is why I feel like November was not the best month for me. But I did read 14 books, which is pretty good, but just the quality, like I read way too many 2-star books than I would have liked, to be quite honest. Anyways, moving on to the books I read. The first book I want to talk about is Black Ice by Becca Fitzpatrick. This book I gave 3 stars. This book basically follows a girl called Brit as well as her best friend who are ready to hike this mountain, and they have been preparing for it, especially Brit. However, they soon find themselves stranded while they're heading there when an unexpected blizzard comes through, and now they have to hike outside to find shelter, and they find shelter in a remote cabin. But unfortunately, once they get there, they find 2 young men already there. But the thing is that these 2 young men are fugitives, so they take them as hostages, and now Brit has agreed to guide them down the mountain in exchange for their freedom. But at the same time, there has also been murders that's been happening around the area, and as Brit goes along this journey, guiding them down the mountain, she starts to kind of piece together certain clues and hints, and now she's wondering what exactly is happening and who exactly are these young men. This book was interesting. I don't think this was an amazing read. I was mostly interested in it because I really enjoyed the Hush Hush trilogy that was written by the same author years ago, back in high school, for me at least. And so I was curious to see about this like thriller, survival type of book, and it definitely kept me engaged, and I was definitely curious to see how everything would pan out. But the one thing I would say is that the plot twist was not a plot twist. I saw it coming a miles away. I was like, from the beginning, I was like, I wonder if this character has something to do with it. It seems very sketch. Long and behold, I was right, which is unfortunate. But that being said though, I do think that the build up to it was very fascinating. So many reveals between the characters and the plot. So I was constantly interested to see what was going to happen next. But unfortunately, because of the huge like big part that was supposed to be the main plot twist, that part kind of ruined it for me because I already saw that coming. Next book I want to talk about is Demon in the Wood by Leigh Bardugo and Yanni Pendergast. This book I gave 4 stars. This is the graphic novel to the prequel of Shadow in the Bone, where it basically just follows Eric / the Darkling, as we all know now, kind of when he's a young boy and he's just trying to find a place to call home while he travels along the roads with his mom. It was a very short book. I definitely felt like I gave a lot more in depth to his character and kind of like his reasoning behind what he did later on in his life. So I found that very fascinating. So I definitely enjoy this prequel. I also feel like this prequel, this story was actually mentioned briefly in the original trilogy. Either that or like the Six of Crows trilogy. I forget which one it was, but I feel like it was the Shadow and Bone trilogy where he briefly mentioned about this trip. And I feel like that's the trip that was mentioned here and kind of what led up to his, you know, ultimate ambition and his path and everything. So I found that very fascinating overall. Next book I want to talk about is Contagion by Erin Bowman. This book I gave 2 stars. So this is a YA sci-fi novel. It follows a distress call that was received and a small team was sent to rescue them. And upon arrival, they find out that everyone is dead and that there's one lone survivor left, and things are not as they seem. This was, I don't know, the premise sounded so freaking promising, but I feel like this is an example where the execution didn't really quite live up to my expectations because it sounded so good. Like I was expecting like alien, something creepy, something crawly, like just horror elements galore. But I don't know, I was listening to an audiobook and I was just like very whatever. Like that was kind of the vibe I had while listening to this book, and that's why I felt like overall I just didn't care too much, I guess. And so that's why this book is just 2 stars for me. The next book I picked up is probably gonna be a controversial one, and that is Concrete Rose by Angie Thomas. This book I gave 2 stars. This book basically sets place 18 years prior to The Hate U Give, and it follows Maverick while he's in high school and kind of what happened to him after he finds out that he now has a baby boy to take care of, while he's also navigating school and the fact that he's also in a gang. This book, I don't know, I felt like just because I love The Hate U Give, this book just didn't have that same quality nor plot for me. Like, I was like, oh, this is interesting, but I was never like, oh my god, I need to know what happens next, like, this is riveting. None of that. So unfortunately, this book was very much a 2-star read for me. Plus, I feel like I also haven't heard that many people talk about it either. So I don't know, it's because there's like a lack of like press and marketing behind this book, but I just felt like I only knew about it because I had read The Hate U Give, and I had put Angie Thomas as a must-read author for me, which is why I picked this up. But unfortunately, with this book, I don't know, like, it was just a very mediocre book for me. The next book I read is actually a series. The first one is Tokyo Ever After by Emma Koji. This book I gave 4 stars. I also gave the sequel Tokyo Dreaming also 4 stars. So this series follows a girl called Izzy, where she finds out who her real father is, and it turns out that he is the crown prince of the imperial family of Japan. Basically, she is a real-life princess. So now she's being flown to Japan to learn more about her father, as well as a country that she's only ever dreamed of. This book dealt a lot into cultural identity, especially for the fact that she lived, I want to say, middle America. So she grew up with essentially 3 other Asian people around her, that's it, and they all formed a really close-knit group just because of their background. So she always felt like she never really belonged, right? So she's fully Asian, but she lived in a place that's predominantly white, and she was always seen as not American enough. And now that she's gone to Japan, she's not seen as Japanese enough because of her upbringing in America. So it talked a lot about her cultural identity, and just like where does she fit in. I really enjoyed this book. I felt like the series is a fun read. I listened to it very quickly on audio, and I was just happy that I was reading it, and I just love the cultural references. I love the food references. I love kind of the etiquette of Japan and how strict they are, and kind of getting it from like a royal family's viewpoint. I just found that super fascinating. The next book I picked up is Mind Games by Shayna Silver. This book I gave 3 stars. So this is a YA sci-fi novel where there's basically an app now that can store people's memories, and people's memories are being uploaded onto this app. The book follows a girl called Arden, who is the daughter of the man who created this app, and she sells these memories on the side by hacking into students' profiles and reselling them to students who can experience these memories firsthand. Basically, it was as if, you know, someone wanted to study for an exam but they didn't have the time to, or whatever it is. Arden can actually hack into a student who did study for that exam and then upload it, so the person now has hours of them studying for an exam that they can later ace. So you can definitely see the benefits of her little side business there. And then one day she finds out that her memories are being deleted, and she also happens to meet a guy who somehow does not have a single memory, which is honestly unheard of, because how does this person even survive? And now she has all these questions to find out, like, what's happening to her own memories, why does this poor guy don't have any memory? And as she kind of uncovers the secrets, you know, things get revealed. This is another book where I felt like the potential was extremely high, but the execution was just okay. I really like the concept of memories being uploaded and all these glitches. For example, there was a whole period that they talked about very briefly, this is not a spoiler, where, you know, there's a glitch happening in the app and everyone just happened to lose like an hour or like 24 hours or whatever of their day, and so no one remembers what happened. It was like the great blackout for them, and so they're just trying to figure out like what happened. We don't really know what happened, and how to make a joke out of it, like, okay, well, maybe they became like sex fiends or something during that 24 hours. Who knows? No one ever knows. Like, the secret is safe with them because the memories are gone. So I found like that concept to be super fascinating, but I just felt like the execution of the plot and who was actually behind everything and the character development was just very lackluster. Then the next book I picked up is Babel by R.F. Kuang. This book I gave 3.5 stars. I'm not going to spend too much about this book because I did do a whole reading vlog on it. I will link that above and down below if you want to check that out. But this was a book where it was incredibly dense, and you really have to take your time reading it to understand what's happening. I do think that the payoff is pretty much worth it, except for the very end, because it was definitely an ending that was a little bit not great. I'm not going to spoil it, but if you read this book, you know exactly what I'm talking about. It is not the happiest of endings, and that's all I'm going to say about that. I just wish it was better, I guess, like more happier note, but that was not the case. It was definitely realistic, but not happy. That being said though, I do feel like this book, the reason why I only gave this book 3.5 stars is because it took me a very long time to get into the book and to really grasp everything. I felt like there were a lot of concepts and magical stuff that was being thrown to you, but nothing was really stated. It was more like inferred, like, okay, this is kind of what it does, but you don't really know, and just kind of like some vague information out there. It's just thrown to you and you just have to like understand what's happening. To me, I'm not the biggest fan of this type of books because I like things to be like stated. At the same time, I don't like when things are just like A, B, C. So it's like kind of hard for me to gauge exactly what I like, but I like a good mix of the two. And this book was very much a very casual showing, not much in depth. You just have to understand it for yourself, and that for me just takes so much longer to understand and get a grasp of the plot. So anyways, that's all I can say for this book. The next book I picked up is The Box in the Woods by Marie Johnson. This book I gave 3 stars. So this is part of the Truly Devious series that I absolutely adored. I've been on a big kick of YA thrillers. I really enjoyed the Holly Jackson series. I also really enjoyed the Truly Devious series. So when I saw this book, I was like, I'm so here for it. This is basically part of the series, but it takes place after everything and kind of follows her into summer camp, where she and her friends are allowed to attend the summer camp to kind of like solve this mystery that's been unsolved for a very long time. And honestly, this was probably the worst book out of it. I don't know, it's just because it was like a one-off type of thing, and I felt like there wasn't a lot of backstory or connections between Stevie and the summer camp itself, that it just felt very off. The entire time I was just like, I just felt like there wasn't that connection, like that it didn't mesh very well, I guess. So for me as a reader, I was like, I love Truly Devious, I love the series, I love Stevie's adventures and like her uncovering all these things, but she definitely had a connection with Ellingham Academy versus the summer camp. So I don't know, I just felt like the story could have also, maybe if it had been more of like a series, it would have been better versus a short novel. I don't know, but either way, I just thought it was just okay compared to the entire series. The next book I picked up is Unclaimed Baggage by Jen Dahl. This book I gave 2 stars. This book basically follows 3 teens who come from very different backgrounds and experiences, and they come together to work in the same summer job, and now they form this tight-knit friendship. And this book was just okay. As you can clearly tell, I only gave this book 2 stars. I didn't care much for the characters, I didn't care much for the plot. It was just a book that I was listening to while I was running errands and everything, so it just felt like it was a book that I didn't connect well with, and I honestly didn't really care. I just was reading it for the sake of reading it, and at the time I was already like halfway done, so I was like, well, it only takes me a couple more hours while I'm doing some stuff, and I just wanted to finish it. So I honestly shoved the end at this book, to be quite honest. The next books I picked up is a series, and that is the Renegade series. So I gave the whole series about 3.5 stars. The first book was a solid 3.5 star read. The second book, Arch Enemies, I gave 3 stars, and then the last book, Supernova, I gave 4 stars. So the whole series about like 3.5 stars for me. I did a whole dedicated reading vlog on this series, so I'll link that above and down below, so I'm not going to spend too much time talking about and rehashing everything over again. But the main point is that the last book was definitely my favorite. I loved how everything concluded. I love how just seeing everything, all the plot, the characters, all their growth come together in fruition. I really enjoyed seeing all of that. That being said though, I felt like the second book was very much has second book syndrome. It was very dull, very slow. It didn't, like, I felt like I just was reading it, like just plodding along just to know what happens next. And then for the first book, I felt like the beginning was very interesting. It kept me engaged, and I felt like I wanted to know what's happening. And plus it also gave me a lot of like Le Boys vibe, so there was that too. But then I got to the halfway point and I was like, it's interesting still, but I lost my like momentum, I guess, in reading it, and that's also why the second book just felt like it dragged way longer than it should have. So for me, ultimately, I don't think this series is really worth the hype that I got all those years ago, but I'm so happy I read it, so now I can be like, it's not worth the hype. You know what I mean? So if you have read this series, let me know down below like what you guys think about it. But for me personally, I think it's very of a series. Then the last and final book I want to talk about is In 5 Years by Rebecca Surley. This book I gave 2 stars. This book is about a girl called Danny who is a lawyer. She has been gunning for this position, and it is now the most important interview of her life where she can finally obtain this long-awaited position of hers. And suddenly she finds herself 5 years into the future, right after her boyfriend proposes to her that day as well. But the thing is, her future her is engaged with someone else. After an hour of not knowing what's going on, she returns back to her present day, but she can't shake this experience away. So for the next 4.5 years, she's been trying to forget about that experience, forget about that memory, until she comes face to face with the same man that was in her dream many years ago. This book has so much hype when it first came out. I remember just people exalting it and loving it and just, you know, hyping it all up. But in reality, this book for me was just an okay read. I was really going into it expecting an amazing romance, and while there was a romance element to it, I felt like that was very much a subplot. It was more about her and her friendship and her own ambition and her career as a person besides the romance. So for me, I was going into it expecting just a full-blown romance, some crazy fiasco. That was not the case. So I think I just went with the wrong expectations or something, because I did not get what I thought I was going to get. So that's why it was a major disappointment on my end. I also felt like the ending was kind of mediocre, because it made me realize that it's all about perception. And that's all I can say without spoiling the ending for you guys, but it's just not what I expected, I guess. So anyways, that's all I can really say for the books I read. Like I said already, my quality of the books was not the greatest this time. I'm really hoping to change that for December and reading some fantastic reads. So far I have read one that's pretty freaking good, and hopefully I read a lot more. But anyways, let me know down below if you have read any of the books that I mentioned this time around. What did you guys read in November that was amazing? Let me know down below. But as always, if you like this video, please do give me a thumbs up. It really does help out my channel. And if you'd like to see more content of me, please don't hesitate to subscribe down below, as well as hit the notification bell. And as always, don't forget to follow me on Twitter and Instagram, and I'll see you guys next time. Bye.